This is the Jim Heath Podcast. Today, Jim is joined by Beth Bean from River Valley Home Health and Hospice to discuss the important role of caregiving. Beth has a master's degree in social work and is a noted expert in her field. Here's Jim.
Let's start. Just kind of give a background. I know that you've mentioned to me 21 years, if that's correct, caregiving and being in that role. So kind of describe your background and what you've been doing.
Yeah, so I've been a social worker for 21 years. I started out in the field of hospice and just stayed there. My social work, my whole career has been in hospice, home health, geriatric, community outreach with a couple different agencies. So that's kind of my specialty, I guess you'd say. I also facilitate a support group for caregivers whose loved ones have dementia through the Dementia Connection of Havasu here in town for 16 years.
You know, until this travel with my mother, it was really, I never really gave it much thought, sort of the angels involved, the living angels involved that choose, like you, to be part of a lot of people's end journey or the sunset of their lives. This is a really personal question, but I've always wanted to ask, does it affect you? I mean, to want to do this and to know that you're committing to sort of the end of the journey, does it still get to you?
Yes and no. There are long days where you've been with a family that's been struggling, or a joyous experience. Through some of it is joyful, and some of it's very hard. It's a mixture of all of that. Sometimes some days are hard, but the overall, scope, it's at least for me. I guess I can't speak for everybody, but it brings me joy. It fills me up. The work that I do, the people that I meet, the experiences. And it's all mixed, just like life. Some of it's, like I said, some of it's harder. Some of it's, I walk away maybe a little tearful, but also smiling on the inside too with what I saw a family, maybe they reconnected or something beautiful happened or, So it's both. I think it's both. And having now experienced the loss of both my parents, and caregiving for my dad, it brings a whole nother Beth into it, a side of me that I didn't know that I can now help in a different way. Not that I didn't help before. I was a caregiver. Of course I did. I'm sure I did. But now it's just a different level.
You know, when I stepped out of broadcasting, I came home and my sister had called and said that mom was having some memory issues. And I remember that first trip to the neurologist. She scored 19 of 30 or 31, whatever, on that first test. And you kind of go into panic because you know that it's going to get worse, that number is going to slip over time, and you just can't control person to person exactly what brain cells are going to be affected, thereby what memories are going to be affected. And one thing in my book that I just can't stress enough, I was just so grateful if my mom had any control over it, that she managed to keep her grace and her positive energy. If I could describe my mom in any certain way, it would be she was just a positive human force. It was always positive. It was always joyful. She was never down, and she managed to keep that, even as I equate it sort of like the space shuttle coming back into orbit with the heat shield, some of the tiles flying off. And she managed to keep her basic essence, even as her memories, were flying, the memory tiles, right, were flying off. She managed to keep her grace and to the very end. But you don't know, when you take that first trip to the neurologist. And looking back, I must say the palliative care of hospice, to me, stands out.
Yeah. So palliative, just a little bit of information on palliative care. So there's lots of different kinds of palliative care. Hospice is palliative care, but so is the palliative program you're referring to, pre-hospice. There's palliative programs that are under home health, that are in hospitals, in doctors' offices, in clinics, and that come into your home. Like with your mom having the different steps before heading to hospice, you got to have the experience of the team coming in and kind of preparing, I guess, or getting more accustomed to all the caregiving roles that you'd have to take on, and what's going to, may happen in the future. We never know exactly the path that things are going to take. But yeah, so palliative care is a really nice step before hospice, whichever the model of palliative care it is. It's very helpful, especially when somebody's only had that one experience of hospice. And we have people on hospice that have to discharge because after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe even a year or even 18 months, they didn't decline. They stayed the same. They didn't maybe get better, but they didn't decline. And Medicare says, you have to be showing decline, to get this great benefit. So they discharge. And so they may come back in a month, 2 months, or a year. Everybody's journey is so unique and different.
Kaisu was our first nurse that came, and that's another part of this, is that the living angels part that I mentioned at the very beginning. You get the right people with the right personalities to come in, a very scary subject, and you hit the nail on the head by not knowing. You just don't know. I remember that neurology exam at the beginning. It was a bright yellow room. They've since left town, so I guess I can tell this story without an issue. But they painted this room bright yellow, and at the end of it, as Mom and I were kind of looking at each other like 19 out of 31, that doesn't sound great, but it doesn't sound dismal. And the neurologist made a comment like, well, at least you don't see a black wall. And of course, we're sitting in this vibrant yellow wall, and we kind of looked at each other. But that stuck with me all the way from that moment to the end of my mom's journey, because we had other family members and friends who unfortunately and sadly started to see the equivalent of a black wall. They got very angry, very restless, hallucinations. My aunt, unfortunately, is in that stage now. Things that my mom, luckily, thankfully, did not go through. But you just don't know exactly where the journey is going to go. And the people you meet along the way are just critical, because I think back, it's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because the people that you meet can provide, when you know that the sunset is here and you just can't control exactly how it's going to play out, the people that are involved in that are just critical.
Yeah, and starting with, Kaisu. I worked with Kaisu for not long enough. I wished I'd had more time, but I had a little bit of time with her and I learned a lot. She's an amazing nurse, and her specialty area, that palliative piece, again, so important, because palliative does bridge the way possibly to hospice. Not everyone goes to hospice, but certainly if somebody wants to, it bridges that. But the education piece is what's so critical along the way. Now, the other part of it is the way a person is educating, their personality that comes into play, how they do it, their presentation. And she has a beautiful presentation, lack of a better word, but presentation on how to be with families, because it's just who she is. She's just very personable. So that's pretty critical too. Her knowledge, her experience, the right program, and then the right person, like you said.
I want to shift gears a little bit here.
Yes.
If there's one thing from my book, I was thinking this morning about our talk today, and there's one thing, it is to any 30 or 40-year-old that has parents out there, have the conversation about all of this now.
Yes.
Because, in my case, my dad, I was anchoring the news in South Carolina, and we took a weekend trip, my mom and dad and I, to Hilton Head. Beautiful scenery, and out of the blue, my dad, out on the balcony as we overlooked the Atlantic Ocean, was like, if something happens to me, you're probably going to be in charge of your mom. And it went in one ear and out the other, and I didn't think that much of it, other than that made sense. Single, I don't have a family like my brothers and sisters. So, and then when the time came, we lost my dad, and then 12 years later, mom started declining, and all of a sudden it was like, the bells went off, like, okay, this was dad's. I remember now, I made that commitment, and that was critical. And really, that's all it took for me. But I was in a unique situation where, again, being in your early 50s and single and not having responsibilities and having a career that was contracted, and my contract was up. So I was able to make that decision. I know a lot of folks are not. So that's why it is critically important for children to have this conversation with your parents, because it's going to involve eventually, particularly as people live longer, it's going to involve either them moving back with you, or in a rare case like me, moving back with them, or probably more likely a facility if you can afford it, and that's a big hefty price tag, depending on
Yeah.
how long you're planning that. But don't wait till the last minute to try to figure that out. That would be, from everything that I've been through, if I had to make one recommendation, it would be for kids to have a serious conversation with your parents about, what are you thinking? What do you want to do? My mom made it very clear, I want to stay in my house and I want to die in my own bed, surrounded by my own things. And so that was what she wanted, and we worked around that.
Yes, everything and that you said, and that is, and that you, before I go into talk about that, I just wanted to share because you didn't, we haven't mentioned it. I mean, you have mentioned it, but I really want to promote your book, Taking Care of Mom, A Son's Perspective on Being a Caregiver. It was wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful, wonderful book. But the story, of course, is what's so beautiful. And there's a picture of your mom.
Miss her every day.
I know you do. Of course you do. What a lovely lady. The book is really helpful, and I hope that it gets into a lot of people's hands because it touches on, in that little book, you touch on so many areas of this journey, just really, really to the point. You put a little bit of education behind it, but then the heart of your story, and tied it together. Very, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with me. So yes, I'm glad that, you're bringing this up. It's really important that we have these conversations earlier. And not only on all of it, what do we want at the, as we age, how do you think we might do this? What are the plans we could put into place? Money, like I said, is an issue. If there's no money, then family. If there's, state aid, whatever, there's lots that comes into play here. And then the other part of it is talking about end of life and being okay with it, not to talk about it every day, all day, and be sad about it and be, but no, it's part of life. So let's just say my parents did that with me pretty early on. I don't know exactly when, I don't have a memory like you do, but this is what I want at the end of life. I don't want to be left on a machine. I don't want to even get that far, hopefully. So, and then as they aged along the way, especially as I got into the field of that I'm in now, we just had open conversations about it. And I was really glad about that, because I do see that that's not the case with everybody. Then, people are not talking about,
and that can make it
illness.
really complicated.
Can't even tell you. Yeah. Because the families that I help are all over, as far as some are so prepared that they have the obituary done before they're really even sick. They have their song. My aunt was like that. She had a little book of handwritten. She was 95 when she died, and she pulled it out and it had songs she wanted at her funeral, the priest she wanted, the people she wanted notified. I didn't know she had that. We were like, oh goodness, she's very organized. And then some people who have not even, they're maybe 80 or 90 and they haven't even told their loved ones if they want buried or cremated. So then the family's like, oh, I don't know what they wanted. So just these conversations. And there's different ways to have them, and there's different guides, and I've got a lot of information and books, and that's one of the things I do, is help people start to have those conversations early on. We actually have a program at River Valley where I can meet with people before they come onto home health or hospice. It's a free program called The Bridge. You don't have to be enrolled in one of our Medicare programs. Call me, and I have these kinds of conversations all the time. And I love doing it, because is this job hard? Yes, earlier, yes, but it's also when I can help start that conversation, or give it some education, or provide the support. Maybe I'll have a one-time visit with someone and I walk away and I felt pretty good about, what I was able to help with. I always hope, that I was. But yeah, starting these conversations earlier. There's lots of books. There's podcasts. There's so much wonderful information out there. To get a person started on this, and it doesn't all have to be sad, and it is just part of life. So.
No, it is. I mean, it's the one commonality, particularly through this political era where everybody's shouting and yelling and disagreeing. The one thing that's universal is death is part of life. For all of us, it's going to happen. So having realistic conversations makes common sense, so that you're not blindsided by it or financially just crushed by it. When you get to that situation. I can't emphasize Medicare. And I was not familiar with Medicare. I'm not old enough for it. I had not paid much attention to it, other than, reporting on it and various aspects of it, but not having any relationship with it until starting taking care of mom. And what a godsend. I don't know what we would have done without Medicare. Medicare just sort of guided us through everything. And that's an amazing program that obviously people turn to, and thank goodness it's there.
Yes, yes. And people don't always realize the benefits under, like you experienced with mom with home health and hospice, are covered at 100%. Because Medicare in some areas of medicine only cover 80%. And then you need that supplement or an advantage plan. But with
And her
those two,
and her hospital visits completely covered.
yeah, yeah. So, and it is a very good program. It is a very good program. And if a person doesn't have, if they're younger, insurance covers some of those programs, some of those things too, with insurance. And then if a person doesn't have any benefit, there is, state aid too. So there are different levels of care, but yeah, it's really important. Yeah, and the
I,
money you mentioned, and save the money. If a person can plan for their future financially, I know not everybody is able, depending on our careers and our education and jobs and all that. But if you can, it's really, really helpful. It's really, really helpful.
and couples do this as well. My dad had made sure that he had an IRA put aside that basically for us became a mechanism for financial survival. So my dad had obviously, as a couple, you can obviously work this out short of your kids before you're bringing your kids into it, or as a child, asking mom and dad what they've done to pre-plan. I have a friend right now whose husband is in dementia in the final stages of it, and she finally, even though he wanted to stay home, she finally had to make the decision that we're gonna have to utilize a facility. But they had pre-financially planned for that for the last 20 years. So yeah, right. So I mean, if all of a sudden that's a new bill for you, unless you're extremely wealthy, which most of us are not, then the pre-planning is just critical. I should say about the book, the only disagreement I remember, my mom, you'd mentioned that some wills were pre-prepared. My mom had written hers a while back, and she had chosen a picture, which I thought was just horrible, and we took a new picture, which we eventually used, and I kept showing it to her last few years of her life. Like, Mom, this is so much better than the one. But of course, I was going to keep her wishes on what she wanted to use. And finally, in the last few months, she looked up at me and she said, "I just want you to know your picture is much better than my picture." So maybe on the screen here, during we can do the two different pictures. The one I
Oh, that's
ended
so
up using
cute.
was lovely. It was a great picture of her.
That's really sweet.
So, I mean, from your caregiving experience, what tips or what do you see that's sort of common that we can bring into the mix here, or the conversation here about caregiving? Is it? I imagine for people who don't have the relationship, I was just lucky. My parents were my best friends, and they always were. They just all through life, mom and dad were my best friends, and I can't imagine not having spent that time. And yet, I have friends who have very poor rapport, if any at all, with their mom and
Yeah.
dad, creating a really awkward situation because who's responsible, in that case. So, what do you see, or what can you advise?
So what I guess each situation is so unique. Like, is there a spouse? No. Is there adult children available? Yes, no. Are there, nieces, nephews, friends, family members, whatever that looks like, whatever the situation looks like, it's no one can do it alone, I guess, is my first thing I'm going to preach, is no one can do it alone. Sitting
True.
around the table, all these years, I've done the caregiver support groups for all these years with hundreds of caregivers coming and going. That's, there may be 5 that show up for group 1 week, and then there's 15, 16, 17. So lots of people coming and going. It's a lot of experiences I can share about. But the one thing I'll say is, no one can do it alone. And it's not a failure if you ask for help. It's not a failure if you need to hire help, if you need to get, paid help to come in, if you need assisted living. You're still a caregiver when your loved one goes to assisted living. But if you need to ask neighbors for help, if you have to call your children who are working, because a lot of people say, my kids are working, I can't bother them. But yeah, most of them that I know want to be bothered. They know maybe they can't come right then, but they want to be called and know that things are maybe difficult. But whatever the situation looks like, is just to get help. And it could be that getting help from the neighbor who says, "Can I do anything?" Or the friend across town, or whatever. And you say, "No, I'm fine, I got it." Well, I tell people, don't do that. The minute somebody asks, have an idea in your mind about maybe, oh yeah, maybe you need something from the store. Maybe you need someone to sit with your loved one while you go to the store so you can get out. Whatever that looks like. If a child offers to take their vacation to come and be there, but lots of times people are like, no, I don't want to burden them. No. Caregiving is typically, it's often a long journey. Yours was, and that's kind of the way it goes. People say, I just want to be okay one day and then die in my sleep. Well, we would all like to do that. So it would be kind of, no suffering, kind of quick. It's typically not. I don't know the statistics, but it's typically not. It's kind of a slow decline. So during that slow decline, the caregiver needs help. So, ask for help, accept the help, get the help. And sometimes people I meet don't have funds to hire people. So let's look into other ways to get you some support. Some people have funds and they don't want to spend it. So I encourage them to spend it, not be wasteful, but let's look at a plan. Can we fit this in your budget? Can you fit this in your budget somewhere? So you're getting a break. And one caregiver told me one time, I would always say, take care of yourself, And she said, I'm tired of you telling me to take care of myself because I can't. I have no one. How am I supposed to do this? And that was okay. It was a good lesson to me, that not just to throw out, take care of yourself, but to say, okay, then let's make a plan. Let me help you. Let's look at this. And we usually can come up with something. But I've seen a lot of caregivers really suffer by the end of the journey because they did not ask for help. They didn't just suffer physically, they suffered emotionally, maybe spiritually, maybe, all the ways.
Yeah.
I guess that's the most important.
Yeah. It's tough, but I did get to a point where if somebody would offer, I'd say, be careful. Be careful with what you offer, because I'm to a point where, I'm likely to accept whatever help. And if I wouldn't have had my sister, Marianne, 2 miles down the road, she talk about a crutch. I turned to her just about, all the time for help. And she was willing, of course, we were all, my brothers too, but they're Phoenix and Tucson, so further away. But utilizing Marianne, we were sort of a team effort there, particularly near the end. Marianne loves to drive, which I don't, and that worked out perfect. All the doctor's appointments and all of that sort of thing. So, Beth, we're almost out of time, but I want to thank you, and I want to let everyone know that hospice is not only great for the end of life, but it's also great in communicating after death. And I think that's critically important here. The profound grief that people have when you say goodbye to a loved one, when you finally reach that critical moment, it is a sad, period of time. And
yes,
there is follow-up care, which can be very, very helpful as well.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. And you're still right in the midst of grieving. You're like in it. You're in the heat of it. That's what I mean, like right current is still. So yes, there's help. When you're on hospice, you have access to a bereavement counselor for 12 to 13 months after your loved one passes. They're still available to you after that, but it's an official program that Medicare has hospices implement, and they're there for support, individual one-on-one meeting with people who are struggling, support groups, mailers. Or it could be that it's not from the hospice. Maybe it's from a church. There's some churches in town that have some grief support. Wherever you get it, yes, that's really, really important.
Beth Bean, nice to see you. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, maybe we'll pick up this conversation and take it a different direction. There's so many different ways to talk about all this. So we'll do it again, hopefully.
I would love that. I'm very passionate about all the topics that came up today, and it was great to meet you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for writing that beautiful book.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
This is the ultimate story about caring, sacrifice, and commitment. Step into the heart of a deeply touching journey with Jim Heath's new book, Taking Care of Mom, a son's perspective on being a caregiver. Join Jim as he sets aside his career in broadcasting to embrace the most important role of his life, caring for his mother, Doris, as she prepares for the sunset of her life. This moving narrative shatters conventional caregiving expectations, shining a light on the powerful bond between a mother and her son. Witness Jim's unwavering dedication as he confronts the challenges of the healthcare system and the emotional intricacies of looking after a loved one. Jim's story is a testament to love's resilience, a tribute to sons in caregiving roles, and an inspiration to all walking this path. Reviewers call it heartwarming and heartbreaking. An unbreakable, beautiful love story. A testament to powerful love. A gift to anyone in a similar circumstance. Makes thoughtful suggestions and honest insights. It's beautiful, and it should be required reading for everyone. You can order your copy of Jim Heath's Taking Care of Mom online today and fill your soul full of love. Available online at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, and other booksellers around the world.
You've been listening to the Jim Heath Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Please be sure to like the Jim Heath channel, subscribe, and check back for our next episode. Thank you for joining us.